This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gould.
Welcome to the podcast that interviews active and retired police officers about their most intense, bizarre, and sometimes humorous moments on the job. I am Steve Gould. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you to all the new listeners. Thank you for all the recent ratings and reviews on iTunes. We want to get the 5-star review. That's what we're after. I know, but I told you I'll take my foot off the gas once we get over 1,000, so we're getting close. They come in weekly, and I appreciate that, and I love you guys for it. Also, Patreon, if you really love the show, you've consumed all this content, and you just are really, really impressed with it, and you really want to support it, nothing makes me happier than when I get a little ding on my phone, and it says I have a new Patreon supporter. So if you want to do that, the link to that is in the show notes. There's 2 levels. You can be a patrolman or a sergeant. You get different things with those. Both of them, you get direct access to me. I respond pretty quickly, and it's just a fun little community. It's kind of like Facebook, but it's Patreon, the feed that I have, and you'll get videos of the interviews and mail you a sticker and things like that. So today's episode is going to be a fun one. Something I've wanted to have, or somebody with this experience I've wanted to have on for some time, a Navy SEAL. So more than that, but he started his career in the Navy SEAL, and then went into being a federal agent for a few different agencies, kind of worked his way up the rung, and now has a book. I have a bunch of dumb Navy SEAL training questions for him because I just am super curious about it. Like I said, Navy, 1980 to 1987. 17 years old when he joined, which is crazy. I wonder if your parents have to sign for that. I'll have to ask him. He was only 5'3" and 110 pounds when he went to BUDS training. That's Navy SEAL training. Then became a NCIS special agent, then assistant special agent in charge at the EPA, and then special agent in charge at the Department of the Interior. And of course, he's authored the book, The Littlest Seal. Without further ado, let me bring on David Brown. Sir, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Steve. Pleasure to be here.
I'm so happy to have you, man. You like David or Dave?
You know what? My friends call me David. Business partners call me Dave. So all right. It's up to you. If we're friends now, David is the guy. I'm your guy.
You know, there's anything I learned in life. You always want a Navy SEAL to be your friend. So we'll go with David. So 17 years old, is that legal, or do you have to have your have your parents sign if you're under 18 to go in the military?
Oh, the more interesting part of this story is I actually signed up when I was 16. I was a senior in high school, and my mother had to go with me to give me permission to sign the papers to go into the delayed entry program into the Navy. So
wow,
it was worse than 17.
Wow. My dad's best friend growing up was Canadian. He moved down here, and he kind of illegally joined the U.S. military. But once he was in, he was 17 as well. But once he was in, they got it all figured out. And back then it wasn't that hard to, kind of scrub it up so he could stay. But I thought 17 was young. 16, my goodness. Is this something you always wanted to do? And clearly it seems like it was a dream of yours.
Another interesting point, today everybody knows what a Navy SEAL is.
UAD originally, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry, say that again?
Weren't they originally called UED or UAD or something?
Long story. I'll try to make it real quick. UDT, Underwater Demolition Team.
There we go.
It was the old school World War II frogmen is where the concept for SEAL team came from. And so through the years, through the 40s, 50s, and into the early 60s, they developed their program, and then President Kennedy saw what was on the horizon for guerrilla warfare and directed the Navy to create a team to combat that. And they created SEAL teams. And then we had UDT and SEAL teams in Vietnam. And then in 1983, when I was in, the Navy saw it clear and made sense that UDT and SEAL teams were doing the same mission. So they basically decommissioned the UDT teams, and we all became SEAL team.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, because I remember, I think Jesse the Body Ventura, when he was governor, I think he was UDT, and then he became a SEAL because of what must have been because of that merger you talked about.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what happened to me. I was with UDT 21, and that became SEAL Team 4 in 1983.
Okay. So the other fascinating part of this to me is, and that you were a smaller kid. I mean, you were 5'3". What did it say? 110 pounds when you went into training. Do you mind if I pull up from your website? I don't do this a lot, so you have to bear with me. But I just want to show the classroom picture of you in school. Can you see that?
Yes, I can.
So here it is. There's a little arrow over his head. The shortest guy, or probably shortest kid possibly in the class. It's really neat. I never really thought about it, but it's really neat to think that didn't slow you down at all, and you became a friggin' Navy SEAL. That's pretty incredible. Because I mean, even here in this state for quite a while, in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, to be a trooper, you had to be 6 foot. They got rid of that because it was, made no sense. But they wanted, the state police in Mass was kind of a fraternity of Marines. They wanted 6 foot tall Marines, and then they kind of, loosened that up. Doesn't make sense because obviously people of all sizes and shapes are capable of doing the job. It was all about optics. They wanted that big tall guy at attention with the hat, super intimidating to you. So what was that? Okay, I have so many questions, Dave. I'm sorry. I'm going on tangents here. Being that you were a smaller guy and you wanted to get into that, was there, and granted, there was probably many positives to that when you're dealing with a tactical team, but when you were going to apply for it, what is applying for it like, and how did that maybe be a deterrent for you because of your stature?
I can tell you from the beginning, I got major pushback. From the minute I went to the Navy recruiter, which I didn't know what a UDT SEAL was at the time, I wanted to be a scuba diver. I love diving. I started diving when I was 8 years old in the freezing cold lakes in northeastern Pennsylvania by myself. And my father thought I was absolutely insane. Yeah. I wanted to, I loved James Bond. I loved all the spy movies, all the police television shows, and I wanted to do fun stuff. That's what I wanted to do. So I went to the Navy and I said, what could I do that's a lot of fun and I can get to carry a gun?
Right. And I like it. It's great.
And the recruiter said, "Hey, look through this book of job descriptions, basically." And I found UDT SEAL. And the first words out of his mouth, "Forget about it. You'll never get there. You'll never do it. I've never known anyone to graduate from the course. And believe me, you're just way too small. They're all big, strong, muscular guys. Just go pick something that makes sense and come back and we'll talk about it." Right.
And this is, you're a young soldier at this time. So those words probably weighed heavily on you.
You know what? It would have if I were someone else who didn't live the life that I lived up to that point. But my entire life has been up to that point was, you're too small. You can't do it. I tried to play football in 9th grade, and I was, I was about 80 pounds and 4'10", and I was trying to play football against the kids that were, 150 and 200 pounds, and I just got creamed.
Yeah, yeah, I bet.
And I learned a lot of lessons growing up. When people said that I couldn't do something, I tried it anyway. And so when the Navy recruiter told me that there was no way I could do it, I just told him, well, back then you couldn't sign up for SEAL Go to Buds. Now, today it's, you can go to the Navy recruiter, you can tell them you want to be a SEAL, they'll hand you the paperwork and say, if you can pass the test, you can go to training.
Okay.
It wasn't like that when they said, you got to have a technical training. So I took technical training being a radarman, but in boot camp, I had to pass the test. And that's what I set my goal to do. And I went to boot camp, and I was the only person out of 24 people who showed up who passed the test.
Wow. And this was a specific UDT SEAL test? It
was a physical test. You had to, it was run, swim, push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, all one after another. And, you had a lot of people there who had a lot of talents. What they couldn't do is they couldn't put it all together.
Yeah, I can imagine. I used to do insurance investigations all over California as a fraud guy. And I drive down to San Diego sometimes, and you would just see a helicopter offshore and then just someone fall out of it. Like no parachute. They would just drop into the water. Then you'd see them on the beach doing crazy stuff. And you're like, these are definitely the SEALs out there training. It's such a brave thing to do. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart, because it's so easy to watch TV and see how cool it is. Probably like you did before you were a SEAL, you see it and you're like, man, being a frogman or that's so covert ops. It's so neat. Like there's so many things that I can think of that, like, even if I had the drive, if I wanted to do that, it'd be so hard to do it. Like I have a problem with, constricted spaces. And it's not a huge problem, but it would be a problem in like a special forces type scenario, I imagine, especially underwater scuba diving. There's been moments in my life when I've like been jammed in a car with a bunch of people going to a bar and couldn't get out, or nightmares about being constricted, or you can't, like, even at my church, this year I was a Roman, one of the Romans. We had like living nativity. So it's like a Jerusalem 2,000 years ago, and all the church members kind of play a different role. I was a Roman, and it looked good, with the Roman hat and the beard and all that. And they put the leather thing on me to pull it over, and I couldn't breathe good in it. And I almost freaked out. I was like, literally praying, don't freak out. This is it's going to be okay. But little things like that you could never get through the SEAL team with something like that. From the videos I've seen, what they make you guys do.
Yeah, there's one particular exercise or evolution, we call them in BUDS, in first phase, and that's drown proofing. If you've ever heard of that, that's where they tie our hands behind our backs and our ankles together, and then they throw you in the pool, and you have to survive doing different things. With bound behind your arms
giving
behind
me
your back.
Anxiety hearing about it.
You got to be able to swim the length of the pool back and forth. You have to be able to dive down, pick a mask off the bottom, and you have to stay afloat for over 15 minutes. And if you panic, you're done. You're done.
Yeah. Did anybody drown doing that?
Well, drowning is meaning death, and I've heard there have been close. Guys have been very close who've actually passed out underwater. They have to bring them up, and they had to revive them.
Luckily, these are like young, virile dudes. You can probably give them a couple pumps, get the water out, and they come back.
Yeah. There's an interesting topic to talk about, potentially having trainees die going through training, because one did you probably heard about Kyle Mullen died last year going after Hell Week. And, the objective of, I say this all the time, the objective of BUDS is not to kill you.
Right.
Everybody going through training to be a SEAL, they're testing you to see if you will push yourself to where you die or nearly are going to get killed. Their objective is to make sure that doesn't happen. So,
right. They just need to make sure you can take it.
And most can't.
Oh, I believe that. Absolutely. I remember they did a special on, they were going to do it on, must have been Discovery or one of the cable channels like 10 years ago, about Navy SEALs. And they lined them all up. And one of the shots, they were all on the beach, like log training, I guess you guys do with the logs. And they were all like kind of in their underpants. And it was so like everybody's so beat. And they're standing there, and clear as day, you could see every one of their wieners through their underpants. And I remember being like, is this part of the training? This like humiliation? They're just standing there like, and they could care less. They're just like so destroyed. I just remember that being like, I can't believe they aired it, but it was so like, oh my gosh, these guys are really like, you gotta want it. You gotta not care. You just gotta push through. And how long is BUDS?
6 months.
Oh my gosh, it's 6 months?
Yes. And that doesn't include the pre-training that you have to go through before you really start the training. And every day is like that. There's not one day that they let up on anything. It's every day. And that's what takes people out.
So it's like, I mean, in like a police academy, they might make it real bad for a couple weeks, but it's like kind of an evolution. Then they like build you up and make you feel proud. Then they break you down. But as you get towards the end, things are getting easier. Even if it's 6 months, things are getting easier because you've learned and you're getting more cohesive with your little platoon. So, but with the SEAL thing, it's just like never ending. I had no idea it was that long.
It never let up. We were push-ups, getting yelled at. We were carrying, it's a long story. We're carrying boulders up a hill, running around a radio tower and back down. And we weren't running fast enough. So they're yelling at us, and we were being treated like we were in first phase. We wanted to kill them.
Is there any, when you're in Bud's training, is there, like, do you have weekends off? There's got to be time to see your family, right? Or like downtime? Because otherwise, I imagine it would just break people.
Yeah, you do have weekends off, but that's usually meant to heal. And we had room inspections every week, so your room had to be perfect. So Sunday afternoon was pretty much taken up with preparing for the room inspection, and then Friday night you barely could do anything because you're so exhausted. So you got about 24 hours. If you had a family, that's when you were going to see them. So.
Wow, that's so crazy. 6 months of that. Is it like the movies? Is there a bell? Like, is there a bell to ring when if someone gives up?
Yep, there's a bell, and I was the guy who shined it every morning before anybody else woke up. It was my job to go out there, grab the bell, and shine off all the fingerprints of all the guys who quit the day before.
And did they give that to you because that was like part of like your hazing? They were like, you're going to ring it?
I actually volunteered to take that duty because if I shined the bell, I didn't have to stand night watch in the evening. So I was more than happy to get up 30 minutes early, shine the bell so I didn't have to get up at 2 a.m. to stand watch for an hour or 2 hours and then try to get 2 hours of sleep and then be up again at 5.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, how proud were you when you graduated from that? I can imagine.
I really thought that was the pinnacle of my existence at the time. I thought this was it. I'll never do anything that can compare to this. And a lot of things happened after that, as you could see. So, for as great a moment as that was, it was just I look back on it now as a stepping stone in my life. And it was something, it was a mountain I climbed, but what was behind the next mountain?
Another mountain?
Another mountain.
Wow, man. That's so impressive and cool. When you graduated from there, you were SEAL Team 4. So does that, do they like retire SEAL teams? Because I remember SEAL Team 6 when you hear about because of I think they killed Obama. They killed Obama. Obama had them kill Osama. Woo, that was a slip. I hope that, so SEAL Team 4, is that done with now? Or does it go on? Does it just keep getting new guys?
Yeah, UDT is gone. They decommissioned UDT 21 and all the UDT teams, but SEAL Team 4 is still there. And, while their mission has changed since I left, we were our focus was Central and South America. So we trained for specific targets in those areas. Okay.
Can you talk about like your first kind of crazy mission you went on that you were kind of like, holy cow, this is nuts?
There are. My first platoon, I ended up, once I got to UDT 21 before I was SEAL team, there's this long process after BUD. You go through another 6 months of training before you're trained to go out and actually do SEAL stuff. They teach you the specifics, how not to kill yourself in the field.
Is this is the second 6 months like a low stress environment where you get to learn and not just be freaked out?
Exactly. Yeah. You don't have instructors beating on you every day. Now it is more about learning how to become an operator and be productive and be specialized, because that's what we are. We were a specialized group of combatants that were designed to do a particular thing. And we trained very hard to do it very well. And so when I got to UDT 21, somebody over in the Mediterranean got in trouble. They needed a replacement. So within 3 weeks, I was on a plane to get board a ship in the Mediterranean with an active platoon. And I didn't know nothing other than what I knew from Bud. So that in itself was pretty intimidating. So, but
I can imagine, like, especially if you're going to do stuff with these guys, obviously you have all the same training, but you don't know them personally like that in like, I know from like working or knowing people that work like drug teams or SWAT teams, like that's a big part of it, is knowing people's strengths and weaknesses. So if you just get dropped into a new thing, well, I suppose you guys are never stop training. So you learn it that way. You learn what people are like.
Exactly. And, somebody said, did they treat me poorly when that happened? And what team guys will do, they won't treat you at all. And that's when you know you're an outsider. If you're not included in what's going on with the platoon, then you know you got a problem. And I had to prove myself. I made a lot of other guys' beds, did their laundry, cleaned the space we were in, and cleaned the weapons. And I did all the grunt work to show them that I was going to work my way into their trust. And it worked really well. And we had a great deployment. We did crazy things. We trained special forces all over the Mediterranean and into Africa. And we did a lot of exciting things, jumped out of a lot of helicopters, jumped out of a lot of planes.
I bet. When you look at the how the special forces are sensationalized, the SEALs kind of are at the top. Like there's also Delta Force movies, my depth of knowledge is so shallow, but it's like SEAL team, Delta Force, then Green Berets, you hear kind of another kind of, I've heard like they're more educators, or they kind of like diplomats to other countries training them. Is there, or like Army Rangers, are SEALs truly, like, I know you might have a biased opinion, but are SEALs truly the highest trained, the top rung of special forces?
I believe in specifically what we do, we are, but all those special forces that you mentioned are, I think, the top in what they do. It's a different concept. We're not going to go in with a large number of people with heavy armament to take a piece of ground or try to kill a whole bunch of people. Our objective is not to be seen, to do the job, get in and get out. And so I would say, I would like to think that we were the best in what we were trained to do.
Okay. Yeah, I think a lot of it too is like you're saying, the clandestine aspect of the SEAL team is kind of what makes it the most kind of have the most mystique, because it's like you said, you're not until recently you guys weren't getting a lot of credit. People knew you existed, but because of the wars in the Middle East and stuff like that coming up, like there's people have kind of like got this interest in it and come to find out that's what you guys have always been doing. You've always been kind of like the super secret type of stuff. I had a buddy who was in the Navy, but he worked EOD, and I think he did work with SEAL teams sometimes because of his specialty, but I don't think he was on a SEAL team. So you guys did work at times with other units, or?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It depends on what the mission is who's going to be integrated into the mission at the time. I know while I was in, we weren't at war, but certainly in the situations that they had in Afghanistan and Iraq, that they used a lot more other services to help, because as I was saying, specialties are what they are. You want the best person there. I mean, if you're going to deal with unexploded ordnance, you want an EOD guy. We didn't disarm anything. We blew stuff up. We didn't we didn't take the bombs apart,
Yeah. Do you have a mission where you guys were like just dropped by helicopter during the night and thinking, as you go out into it, like there must be a real thought of like you might not come back from this, or how's this all going to end? I mean, how did you handle that?
This is it's a challenging question because at least at the time, I never thought I wouldn't come back. I was so sure in myself and my platoon. I always thought there was always a way to get out. There was always a way to survive. There was always a way to overcome and, as we would say, finish the mission. And so
that's awesome.
It's not that we weren't afraid of going forward. You have to have fear to be careful, but I never thought I wasn't going to come back.
Right. Yeah. You have to have fear to be courageous as well. Yeah. Cause I would be like the guy falling out of the helicopter, like, we're all going to die. This is a mistake. Pick me up. Man, that's unbelievable. You got to have the mindset. Absolutely. Dave, that's so cool. I'm so impressed with that. All right. Let me ask you about transitioning from the SEALs to being a special agent and why you initially, I guess it was a natural transition. If you're going to go special agent, NCIS, that's Naval Criminal Intelligence. So kind of made sense.
I didn't really focus on NCIS. They were kind of an afterthought for me. I actually applied to the Secret Service, and I was going to apply to the FBI. And as almost a whim, I went to NCIS as a backup just in case something else didn't come through. And they were the fastest to respond. I did an interview, and within 2 weeks, I got a phone call. We want you at FLETC, in 30 days. So.
Yeah, it must be. Is FLETC? I mean, because I had military guys in my police academy, and it was kind of like the police academy when it came to the drill and ceremony and like them yelling at us. To them, it was like old hat, not a big deal. To civilians like me, it was like, oh, they're yelling at us. So I can imagine going to FLETC as a SEAL must be kind of like a nice, like low intensity training scenario.
It was. I guess the equivalent of like Navy boot camp compared to going to BUDS, that's what, as far as physical goes, they have this standard down there, the 500 and the PT test. I actually went to FLETC twice and I scored 500 both times. One when I was in my 20s, one was when I was in my 30s with EPA.
That's awesome. Did you have to go to FLETC again to change agencies?
I did, because EPA is such a specialized set of laws. You need to you won't go through basic FLETC, but you're going to go through their EPA add-on, which is 2 months.
Okay, I get it. Do you know that as a young Steve Gould, I was like 22, I had a friend whose cousin was a special agent with the NCIS, and I was kind of looking at what I want to do just out of college. And I actually graduated with a computer degree, and I kind of heard from my friend's mom, like, they're looking right now for people with strong computer backgrounds. So I talked to, I'll never forget it, it's Special Agent Jeff Morrow. I don't know if you ever knew him. Probably not, but he was out of Newport, I think the sub base in Newport. Mm-hmm. And as luck would have it, I just bought a house and I had a puppy. And the way he was like, yeah, this is going to be tough for you. If you're like, he said, if you're the kind of guy that like, you like living around your family and you just bought a house. And he said, first of all, he said, these backgrounds are really intense, like manpower intensive. And we really don't even want to start the process unless you're like all in. Like, this is off the record talking to him because I knew his cousin. And I just had to tell him, like, yeah, you're right. I'm just going to probably be a local police officer because I kind of like being around my family. And the way he painted it was like, the first few years you could be at the Great Lakes, or you could be the next 3 years, you could be overseas. You could be, he goes, it probably 10, 15 years in, if you wanted to get back to the Rhode Island area, because I was from Cape Cod, it's kind of close. He said you maybe could get back to like Boston or Rhode Island. And I was like, geez, that's a long time to come home, So it kind of, at least I knew up front it wasn't for me. But was that what it was like? Were you all over the place with NCIS?
Absolutely. NCIS, I think, moves people more than any organization that I have ever been affiliated with. I I was in Pensacola in the Navy. I went to Paris Island, and it was my first duty station with NCIS, Beaufort, South Carolina. Within 3 years, I was in Honolulu for my second assignment. And then 3 years after that, I was in Washington, D.C. And so, within 7 years, I had moved 3 times.
Wow, that's crazy. And when you were NCIS, is that, do you work with JAG? Is that kind of like, are they kind of like the DA's office of the Navy? Like they prosecute the cases, you're the investigator? Is that how it works?
Yes.
Whew. I swear I was going to be wrong in that, but I got one right. Sweet.
Oh, we do work with the local, any prosecuting authority that has jurisdiction over whatever the crime is we're investigating. That's who we're going to work with.
Okay. As NCIS, do you have a most memorable case that you can talk about?
Yeah, there's so many, but I'll go over like 2 really quick ones. And I think people have a little bit of a misconception about NCIS. They think there's this big, super technical, like the TV show. They got a big screen up there. And
I see like binary code and like holographs. NCIS.
Yeah, well, my office I started off with 4 people, and 4 people to take care of a Marine Corps base, a Navy base, and a whole housing project that they based, that all the people lived in. So we had to do all the general crime that came in. We had to do the foreign counterintelligence reports, and we had to do all the fraud work. And everybody in the office was new except for the special agent in charge. So we learned a lot really quickly, everything from homicides to doing drug deals to I did my first search warrant down there. Was looking for FBI backup and in Army CID. I get down to Savannah, Georgia with the warrant. Guess who doesn't show up? The FBI.
Yeah. Not reliable, huh?
So here I am by myself, a junior G with an Army CID guy doing my first search warrant. But you know what? Like I said before, I overcame, got the search warrant, got the goods, and we got the prosecution. But I would have to say, probably one of the most memorable cases I did was out in Honolulu, where I was working fraud. And we had a contractor there that was just cheating the hell out of his people and the government. And he was just really slippery to catch.
You imagine the balls on somebody to do that? My goodness.
Yeah. But, the locals, they wanted a job. They were willing to take, whatever pay he was giving them. And I ended up recruiting his general construction manager, because I had the goods on him. And we flipped him and sent him back in with a wire. And we wired him up a number of occasions. And I actually used a Navy captain as a source and wired his office in and did some consensuals with the target on a Navy base. And it ended up, we went to trial, 2 weeks of federal trial, and we won the case. And the best part about it is he had to pay back his employees. And that, I joined law enforcement because I wanted to help. I wanted to help people. You feel good when the case you're doing makes a big impact for the community. And while I never felt good about putting people in jail, sometimes they deserved it. And I was really glad to see that these people got their money back.
So what was he doing? Was he kind of like paying them one rate and then charging a different rate for them type of thing, like kind of padding it, kind of keeping
Yes, exactly. He was falsifying all of his labor records to us. He had carpenters and cement masons and bricklayers, and instead of paying their prevailing wage, he would cut their pay in half just so they could keep their job. He said, keep your job. If you want your job, you're going to take the pay I give you. And they did for 4 or 5 years, even before I got there. So the restitutions were pretty big. made difference in these people's lives.
Did you have one of the employees? Was that where it started? Did they kind of tip them off?
You know what? It ended up doing the paperwork is what brought the case to looking at the paperwork and doing the analysis is what gave me the idea. I'm going to go out and start talking to these people, because if they're getting screwed out of their paycheck, they're going to want to talk. And like you just said, that's where it started. Started talking to people. They started flipping on the boss. So,
I'm sure they were pissed when you clipped them up. Did you go personally and arrest them, or was it? Did you kind of just summons them?
Fraud cases. Everybody gets summoned.
Yeah.
Right?
Not as satisfying.
No, they don't do the perp walk with fraud cases. We did a couple with the EPA. We did a couple arrests with EPA, but mostly, all the fraud cases were all. Most these guys are business guys. They're in suits. They're in their office.
Right.
To pull them out. The U.S. attorney really wasn't interested in making a scene like that.
Yeah, the federal court system works so differently anyways. Like where I used to work on the Cape, we had a national seashore, so we used to deal with rangers all the time, federal rangers. And some of the laws are so different than like mass state laws. Like they didn't have a booking room or cells or anything, so they would use ours. And then like for an OUI even on park land, they didn't have the right to hold the person. So they would come, they would do the breathalyzer, and then they would just be kicked out. Like they didn't hold them. I think because of necessity. I think because like there was no federal magistrate, like there was no one to call. These guys weren't like they had to. I know they used to hold their arraignments in the basement of the post office in Hyannis. The Rangers, because that's where the federal magistrate worked out of.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just very different. Also, I've said before in the podcast, like we'd also swear them in as local police officers, because we had Route 6 went through town, 4-lane undivided highway, and it led to the park. So it just made sense that if they did a more vehicle stop and it went onto a state road, we wanted them to have full authority, But on parkland, you could pull somebody over, get him out of the car, and search their car. It was legal. But as soon as you're on Route 6 on Cape Cod, now you were in the hat of the state laws. So, there was kind of a little bit of like, hey, you can't, with what you're doing right now, I don't think you can order them out and search their car. Massachusetts has got a lot more rights for their citizens than the state park does. That was kind of what it broke down to. But those guys got a lot of stuff. They got a lot of people go to national parks to get super high. Kids from the city would come down with all kinds of drugs. Like they were busier than you'd think on this little national park in Cape Cod,
Yeah, I worked really close with the Park Service, with the Department of Interior. They're within the Park Service. The Park Service is under the Department of Interior, and one of the, I don't know if you want to talk about this now or you want to go on to something else.
Let it rip.
One of the most interesting cases I ever worked with was with the Park Service on Oahu. We had a couple knuckleheads out there moving back like the boulders and sneaking into the ancient graves of the Hawaiians.
Oh my! And they were knuckleheads.
Yeah, and they were stealing artifacts and from the graves, and that's actually covered under the specific federal law, Native American Graves Reparations Act, and what they were doing is they were stealing them and selling them on the black market for drugs. And so the Park Service got wind of this. They invited us in, and one of my agents out there at the time, we wired one of their guys up who was faking he was a druggie, went in and got the goods on these guys. You know what? And it was a great case. And it was a big deal. Like, it was another one of those, oh my gosh, we are making a huge difference in the Native Americans in Hawaii. It was phenomenal. And the locals loved it. The U.S. attorney loved it. And we got to stop some really silly crime. I mean, and the information we had, they just kind of fell into it. Like they were like out on a mountainside and they saw a cave and they just wandered into it and just start stuffing their pockets with stuff. That's how crazy it was.
Yeah, that's so dumb. I mean, on Cape Cod, where there was a big Nas Indian and the Wampanoag tribes, it's like every contractor's nightmare if they find bones, because then the job is just done, because they got to come in and, if it's an Indian burial ground, then it's a whole nother deal. You know what I mean? So to be so careless and just go in and be like, yeah, this is okay. Just take this stuff.
Well, and the people buying them must have known we didn't get them on any crimes for buying it because we couldn't prove that they knew that it was actually taken from a grave, but they had to give up all the pottery and all the other things that they had that they got from the cave, which cost them thousands of dollars. So, they lost out in the end, and all these artifacts that we got were repatriated back into the caves, which was really cool.
My goodness. That's awesome. Do you have another NCIS case that stands out in your mind?
What one that jumps out at me, they're fraud cases, if you don't mind hearing about fraud cases.
Sure.
One of the important things about the military in the Pacific is that, we have to be ready for war at all times. And if we lose power, for instance, on Oahu, then it just shuts down everything going to the Pacific, our supply line, our food line. And so there was a big multi-million-dollar project was to replace one of the standby generators, one of the electrical generators for the base. And it was worth millions of dollars. And we got a complaint from the contracting officer that they didn't believe that the generator they got met the specification, but the paperwork did, and they couldn't figure out what was going on. So I took the case and I started doing the research, and I found out that the generator that they had placed was not to specification. So, but what about the paperwork? How are we going to prove that this paperwork was falsified?
Right.
I'll tell you how old the case is. There was an actual fax. Remember the old faxes that they had, not with the type of ink that you could just take an eraser and erase the ink off of it. Well, I had a theory, went to the judge with it and said, look, this is what they did. I believe that they falsified this document by simply erasing it and writing in the numbers that they wanted. And the judge was like, or the magistrate says, you can't do that. And I said, give me your eraser. And I just erased it right in front of him. And I wrote the number in, and he gave me the warrant.
Nice. That's great.
And so we ran downtown into this business. Can I mention the business on air or no?
Yeah,
or
sure.
Should I not? It was Cummins Diesel.
Oh, wow.
Big company.
Yep.
And one of their engineers went down to their business, and sure enough, did a search warrant on this guy's office. And I found the fax paper that he erased, and it had the eraser marks on it.
Wow.
And took it he ended up pleading guilty. But for me, that was a big deal. Again, another one of those. If something actually happened and that generator didn't work, it would have been a major issue for the military on Oahu. So
that's unbelievable that somebody would do that. I mean, it's kind of like taking a bribe as a cop. Like, you pull somebody over and they try to slip you $100 bill. It's like, pal, you better hand me a couple mil, because this is my pension if I take this bribe. Like, why doing something so small like that? Just giving you the wrong size generator. The guy puts himself out there like that. It's especially someone. It sounds like he was an engineer or something. Seems nuts.
He was an engineer. Most of the people we dealt with on these fraud cases were well paid, well educated white males.
Yeah, I think this is totally anecdotal. I think people like engineers in those kind of positions are sociopaths. I think they don't I don't think they have a moral compass. They're too smart. They're just like they have nothing. They're just whatever suits them, whatever they want, like kind of like a narcissistic type of thing.
Determination, technology, and street smarts. That's how you solve so many remarkable cold cases. If you or someone you know is frustrated and needs help, contact Tim Corbett and America's Cold Case Experts. It's not too late for justice. Visit coldcaseexperts.com now.
Every single one that we ended up convicting, putting in jail, consistently, they all said the same thing. I never thought I would get caught.
Yeah, not sorry. But
right, it was always I never thought you would catch me, because it was just they just didn't think there were people out there like me or us who were watching them.
That's unreal. That's so cool to know that. Because I'm not alone in this, where the general public doesn't really know. We have an idea about like what NCIS agents are up to or what they have to deal with. I mean, we imagine. When I hear about it, I imagine like a sailor got drunk off base and crashed his car and then was AWOL, or like stuff. I'm sure, and those were like very minor things you dealt with, but you never think about the fraud aspect or people trying to get over on the government. It's pretty crazy.
Tens of millions of dollars. That was for me. That was we did early in my career. I did out in town. Selling marijuana or trying to buy marijuana from sailors and that kind of stuff. And, that really, I had my share of homicides and autopsies. And that's when I decided, fraud sounds pretty interesting.
Yeah. I think I've occurred enough trauma. Let's try something different. Absolutely.
Yes.
Hey, Dave, tell me and the audience, what does a special agent in the EPA do?
I'll tell you what, a lot of people don't know anything about it. And that was the most exciting job I had as a special agent.
Really?
Yeah, we did more undercover work, more wires, more search warrants than any other organization that I worked for. We focused on the biggest environmental polluters in the country, because this organization was so small. We only had 150 agents when I was there, to cover the entire United States.
To be honest with you, I didn't even know they had special agents. When I saw it on your resume, I was like, whoa. Yeah,
it was kind of like the SEAL team of, special agents kind of thing, where, like I said, the cases we did, I got the bronze medal for a case I did. I got, the Justice Award from the Attorney General from the United States for a case I did. One of the biggest criminal fines until the Exxon Valdez crash was my case.
Wow.
They were big high dollar cases with didn't garner a lot of jail time. Usually only a couple of years at the most, but the impact was pretty big deal. So you want to hear one of those?
Yeah, I'm picturing like Steven Seagal in Alaska fighting the oil company type of thing. Is that what we're talking about here? I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. It's think about Burlington Northern Railroad, Fortune 500 company, huge company. One of the cases I got when I first got to EPA, they, as usual, I'm the guy who gets the case file on his desk that has AKC written on it. And you know what the AKC stands for, right?
No.
American Kennel Club. It's a dog. It's not going anywhere.
Oh, really? That makes sense.
And so I got all the dog cases, and almost all the time I was able to make something out of it. And this was a big deal. Burlington Northern was transferring lead ore between the lead mined in the smelter in Missouri. If you know anything about Missouri, lead is king. That's where all of our most of the lead in the United States comes from.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Well, they were transferring it back and forth in these rail cars every day, tens, hundreds of them. And every once in a while, someone would throw a bunch of garbage in the car or something like that. So I had to take it out of line and they had to go clean it. Well, Burlington hired a couple local Hoosiers to clean these cars. And they, instead of just taking like the debris out, well, all the lead ore was stuck to the bottom. They got a bobcat in there and they started bobcatting all this lead ore onto the side where it's called a siding, a mile long and about 5 feet deep of lead ore. And it just poisoned the entire mile. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the guys who did this, they started taking that stuff and using it as fill all around the county.
Oh my gosh.
So you had pig farms and chickens and everything. All the animals were lead poisoning. The children had lead poisoning.
Dave, haven't we known since like the medieval times when they stopped collecting rain runoff from lead roofs? Didn't these people know that was poison? I guess not.
That's why it's a crime.
Yeah. Jeez.
So what turned that case is the interesting part. It was they were going to pay a civil fine and they were going to clean it up. But what in a subpoena that I got, I was looking through boxes and boxes of records they just dumped on me. But there were some pictures in there, and I started looking through the photos, and there was a car, and I could see the license plate. And in front of the car on that siding were the guy's two children. He had them out there on the siding, and they were playing in the lead ore. Oh. I took that photo and I blew it up and I ran a plate, and I was able to track them down, and we were able to see the stunted growth of these kids for like 10 years.
You're kidding me.
That brought Burlington Northern to the table in a plea, and it took care of the case.
Wow, that's incredible to use the actual effects of the lead on the kids. I mean, I've been a firearms guy for I don't know, 15 years, like an instructor, and they like urge us to get like a lead test. Just I think because a lot of the old time instructors did a lot of indoor shooting without proper ventilation, stuff like that. But they're real serious about it. And I have to give out a lead warning when I qualify guys. Like, hey, if you even though it's all copper coated now, but still residue gets on your hands. And if you're going to go home and be intimate with your wife or whatever, make sure you wash your hands, because you don't want to eat or touch anybody else when you have lead on your hands. And to me, it's always just kind of been like, because ammo's so clean now, it's been kind of like, whatever. But the fact that you're telling me that you were, I mean, it's not funny. It's horrible that you were able to go back and look at these kids' development from the exposure to that lead. That's insane. This case sounds huge. So at this time you were a supervising agent in charge, right?
When it settled, I had been promoted by the time it settled, but it started off, I was the agent for that case.
That it just seems like a monstrous investigation. I mean, spread over multiple counties, multiple properties, collecting how long did this take you to get this to court, like completed?
3 years.
Yeah, I can imagine, because you got to interview so many people. You have to get all their info. You have to photograph the sites. Then I'm sure you had to get testing done, because, courts, they want to know it's actually lead, it seems like a huge headache. I like an investigation that ends by the end of my shift.
This was a monster. It was. We had to show, you asked about EPA agents. We had to show a reportable it's called a reportable quantity, which means X amount of lead ore was dumped into the environment within a 24-hour period. So I had to prove that was the case. And through a series of a whole bunch of different things, I was able to prove that not only the reportable quantity, but way more than that was dumped into the environment. And the statutes that EPA agents use are very technical, and we do call in our technical people to come in and take samples, because sometimes this stuff, we don't want to be touching it.
Right.
And it has to be collected perfectly because it's evidence and it can't be contaminated. So, I had done a search warrant in level A. If you know what level A, level A is completely encapsulated with a scuba tank on my back. I did a search warrant, or me and another guy did a search warrant because the building was so contaminated we wouldn't be able to breathe inside.
Wow, how quickly can so lead, like one extreme exposure to lead like that can make you very sick, and your body's not capable of processing it, right? That's the problem. It builds up in your system.
Exactly. And lead, I don't know what if it can or how long it takes, but there are certainly other metals that you cannot exude from your body. Once they're in there, you're done. There's nothing you can do to get rid of them.
Man, that reminds me, when I was a natural resource officer, there's a thing called roundworm, I think it's called, and it lives in the scat of raccoons, but you don't know if it's affected you for like 15 to 20 years later. And I was exposed to like some dried like raccoon scat a few times, and and it was like airborne in the building, and I'm like, I'm just waiting for that. I'm just waiting to go brain dead, Dave.
I think he turned out okay.
So far, so good. As long as I keep having good guests like you guys can carry the torch. I'll just ask the dumb questions. David, is there a in your whole career, is there a moment where you can really think of like the most intense moment you had as an agent or a SEAL or either or?
One of the most memorable moments is when I did another search warrant with the EPA. Long story short, there's a metal plater. If you know anything about the process of metal plating, when they're dipping or when they're chrome plating metal, it creates a really nasty byproduct and a hazardous material that they have to get rid of. So the case was about them dumping their byproduct into the sewer and contaminating the wastewater treatment plant. Oof. We needed to catch these guys in the act of doing it, because we had a device in the sewer that would alert us when they were dumping. And they always did it at night. So we gathered all of our agents up so we could do a search warrant in the middle of this night. And unfortunately, we get the signal, and a tornado is coming through. This is in western Missouri, where tornadoes, and so the wind is we're at like 100 and some miles an hour. Everybody's on the radio. Are we doing this? Are we doing this? I'm like, well, of course, you know what I'm going to say. Yeah. we're going in. And so we got the signal, and we went in, and in the middle of a tornado that flew by about just a few miles from us. But as I broke through the door, the operator was just this big guy, and he came at me, takes a swing at me. I duck under his arm and run underneath him. My partner, as he turns around to jump on me, my partner jumps on him and takes him down face first. And he went face first into his waist stream.
Whoopsie pie.
So we because it was acid, we had to pull him out of there real quick and roll him over. The guy was so big, we couldn't get the cuffs on him. We had to use zip ties to zip tie his hands behind his back. But that was probably because of the tornado and the guy almost jumping on me from behind. That was probably one of the more intense moments.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my goodness. My wife is tornadoes are terrifying to my wife. And we've looked at living in other places in the country, and then She would find a place that looked great or whatever, and then she's like, "Oh, they have tornadoes. Nope, not gonna do it." That's scary, man. That's awesome. I can see the scene, with the wind whipping and outside and guy attacking you. That's awesome. David, can you tell us a little bit about your book and what kind of obviously your career of just kind of never taking no for an answer kind of inspired it, but what can people expect when they read your book?
They can expect a very positive story is what they can expect. It's a book about overcoming physical, psychological, emotional, family challenges. And I try to answer questions as I go through the stories that I tell. Why did this happen? And how was I able to do certain things that really I shouldn't have been able to do? I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't big enough. I wasn't strong enough. I did things in going through SEAL training that were physically impossible. And there's reasons, there's explanations for those things. And I try to give people those explanations, and hopefully they'll take the stories away and look at themselves and say, look, you know what? This guy almost died over here. He pulled through. My challenges weren't anywhere near what this guy went through.
Yeah.
And that's what I want. I want people to look and read the stories. Some of them are funny, and some of them are just like, there's no way that can't happen. And you're more likely to meet an NFL player than a Navy SEAL. And I want to say 0% of making it, but obviously I had at least a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. David Brown, absolute honor to have you on the show, brother. Thank you so much for giving me an hour of your time. I'm going to do the outro. That you can find a link to David's book and to his website in the show notes, and I'll put it on the website as well, of course. Thank you, sir. Can you hang out for just like 10 seconds when I do the outro so I can just chat with you?
Absolutely.
All right, sir. I'll be right with you.
Thank you. All right.
The great David Brown, ladies and gentlemen. Finally got a Navy SEAL on here. Great stories. Super interesting. Sorry for all the dumb questions, but I think you guys had the same questions. That's what I'm going with. Today's the time in the show when we thank the Patreon donators, subscribers, the people that keep the lights on over here. And who I'm talking about is William James Long. That's Deputy William James Long to you. The great Tammy Walsh, Seth Wright, Scott Young, the great Sasha McNabb, the great Tom Connell, Gary Steiner, Nick Noose, Nathan Gowan, Daniel at Motorcop Chronicles, the great Scott Minkler, Mike Wynn, Lane Campbell, Lauren Stimson, James Rose, Jake Pinedo, my man who gifted me an X-Belt. Thank you so much, sir. Wayne M. Miller, Jason Lau, Greg Gadboy, George Tessier, Tony Fahey, Derek Warden, Doug and Kelly Newman. Love you guys. Chris June, Corey Payne, Sean Clifford, just Dennis because that's all he put. Dan at Burley Boards, Brandon Hooker, Braden Walker, the great Ben Peters, everybody, Andy Biggs, John Shoemaker, and Adam Mihal. I love you guys. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for supporting the show. Ultimately, I would love for the show to be only supported by Patreon. That way, I have my security and I can run my mouth as I wish without the threat of losing a sponsor. So, hey, if that sounds good to you, become a Patreon member. And guys, you probably already heard one by now because this is coming out in a few weeks, but I'm going to start doing some lives again. Going to have Ken Royable, the great Ken Royable, back from Police Applicant Podcast. And also thinking about maybe once a month bringing back a former guest to go over some topical stories in the news and get their thoughts on it, get to know them a little bit better. So that's what I have going on. And yeah, guys, I'll see you next week.